Good afternoon everyone, the mic is working. Welcome to this session, Financial Fair Play at Home and Abroad. My name is Ben Shea from Supporters Direct, and without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to our chair, Rory Smith.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. Ben's stolen my opening line, which was what this was. It doesn't maybe sound like the most sort of sexy subject to spend your time discussing on what was a sunny Saturday afternoon, but is now overcast. There's no question that financial fair play has become of increasing importance really in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's something that affects the game at every level. It's not just about Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain being hit with squad reductions from Champions League. It's something that means something to fans at every level of the game across Europe, across the world. And hopefully what we're going to do in the next sort of hour or so is discuss how it matters, why it matters, and what we can all do about it really. The panel we have here is Ben, who's already introduced himself, who is a development officer for Supporters throughout Europe. To his right we have Valerio, Casagrande, who is the Chief Financial Officer of Serie B. And to my right we have Lyons, who is the Chairman of Cork City and the Club Supporters Trust. We were due to be joined actually by Valerio Smith, who works for UEFA on the licensing committee, but he sadly couldn't be with us to give us his unique insight from inside the FFA process. To get started, I might ask Ben the first question. We're in the middle of the summer, the transfer window. Teams across Europe are spending huge amounts of money, eye-watering sums of money, and they're being pressured to do so by their fans because they want to win titles, to get promoted, to avoid relegation. Financial fair play seems to be kind of running against that almost, that it's asking teams to control themselves. Do supporters want financial fair play, and should they want financial fair play?
I think it's a fair question in a way. A friend of mine earlier actually showed me a Facebook page that he found that was set up with the title Supporters Against Financial Fair Play, which was quite a strange sight because at Supporters Direct, and I'm sure the FSF would share these sentiments, it's an issue that is of central importance to supporters. Speaking from the Supporters Direct perspective, we recently took part in a project that had 9 partners from 8 different countries. It was funded by the European Commission. FORAS were among the partners. And it looked at improving football governance and doing that through supporter involvement and community ownership. And as part of the project, the partners surveyed supporters in their countries. And only 12% of those supporters surveyed weren't interested in issues relating to ownership, governance, financial sustainability. Now, okay, the survey didn't touch every football fan in Europe, but I think it's indicative that, yes, this is an issue that matters to fans, and more than that, supporters want their club to be here not just in 5 years and 10 years, but preserved for their children and grandchildren as well.
Turning to Valerio, not many leagues in Europe have done quite so much as Serie B to encourage financial sustainability within their clubs. Speaking personally, I suspect for a few people here, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on Serie B. Could you perhaps walk us through the measures that you've taken and the reaction you've had from clubs and from fans as you try to encourage teams to be more responsible financially?
First of all, let me say thank you to Sports Director to invite me. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be here. About the measurement we took as a Serie B, the most important is the introduction of the salary cap rule. Our clubs reported in the last few years significant losses, and we noticed that the personnel cost was extremely high in comparison to the club's revenues. So we decided to do something about, and the most reasonable measurement we thought we can take was working on wages, on players' wages. In particular because in a period of economic crisis, and economic crisis is very tough in Italy, it looks more difficult work on revenues than working on costs. So basically there is a budget for our teams. They cannot spend more than 150,000 per each player. I'm talking about the fixed part of the wages and the same amount for bonus, for variable parts of the wages. You can go up this threshold if you respect a total ratio. This total ratio is named AVP. It means A are the wages of the players, MVP are the revenues. This ratio must be lower than 60%. So if a club is over this 60%, if the club is below the 60%, is fine. If the club is up the 60%, the league investigate each single contract of the club. And if the single contract, the amount of the single contract is over the threshold I told you, the league retain the share revenue of the club and distribute the revenues to the other clubs. The salary cap rule was implemented in the last season. So last year was the first year of implementation, and we had 5 clubs sanctioned for a total amount of 800,000 of revenues of sharing that the league retained and distributed to the other clubs.
What was the reaction like from the clubs and from the supporters when you suggested?
Basically, the introduction of the salary cap was promoted by the clubs because they were conscious that the situation wasn't longer sustainable, and for clubs is help because in some way the salary cap increase the bargaining power of the clubs over the player's agent. So generally speaking, the reaction of the clubs was good, even though the clubs having more spending capabilities are reluctant. We decided to adopt what in the literature is called a soft salary cap. So, as I told, they can go the threshold, the percentage we stated. But if they go over, they give up to some money. So that's a way to keep investor with higher spending capabilities. Talking about supporters, I think the reaction was quite good because I think a more sustainable system keeps lower the risk to see the club disappear. So I think it's good for supporters. And we had quite good reaction even from football players, and maybe perhaps surprisingly, because basically the salary cap the wages of players, but I think the idea of the players is it's better to be paid, gain less money, but be sure to be paid, unless take the risk to go for more money. But if the club go bankruptcy, in case of failure of club, they don't have any money. So the reaction was quite good.
I think the experience that Pat had in Ireland is probably quite starkly in contrast to that, in terms of the structures and the assistance and the environment that was in place when FORAS took charge of Cork City. Could you tell us a little bit about the situation you found at the club and what you've done at Cork to bring you to the point where you are today?
I suppose when FORAS took charge, it was when FORAS was founded, first of all, before we ever took charge of the club, it was founded as kind of a safety net if anything went wrong, or in order to provide some money to the club that it might use to build infrastructure, but would still be under the charge of FORAS. Like, one of the things, the history of soccer in Cork, I suppose, is that of failed clubs over a few years. Like, we're in existence, Cork City, for the last 30 years. This is our 30th year, and we're probably the longest serving club in Cork, I think, at this stage. But there were many clubs before that, but the problems with all of them were that they were owned individually by a businessman who felt that there was an opportunity maybe to make some money on the foot of League of Ireland. But that was an impossibility then. It may be possible now with more teams, the level of standard of playing improving, that you may get access to Europe and you may make a few shillings there, but it's not a sustainable model to go into football in the League of Ireland to try and make profit from it. In any event, we had a very good chairman, an excellent chairman, who was the owner, and under him we had our most successful years to date, I suppose. Everything was going grand, but then we had a company come along who bought him out. They lasted a couple of years, and then they went burst, and then we had this other guy who came along who I think should remain nameless, but in any event, he really did us damage. And when he was wound up by the courts, the judge gave us the opportunity to take in charge of the club. We already had FORAS in place. We had applied for the licence to the FAI, who were the governing body then. The FAI took over from the clubs who ran the league before that, and the FAI gave us a licence to compete in the first division, which we did. We finished 6th, I think, in our first year. In our second year, we were champions. So we're back in the Premier Division. But it took, what behind all of that, it wasn't so much that we had proper operating systems in place. I suppose it was just that we had a few good people who did a lot of good work. And it kind of, I suppose it, like when we went out to people looking for funding, for sponsorship, for anything, it was very difficult to get over the reputation that people had made for Cork City. Even though we were new, we didn't carry any of those debts because they went into receivership, examinership and so forth. And we were new and fresh, but people have long memories, and they said, you're the guy who didn't pay for the buses, you're the fellow who didn't pay for the hotels, you're this, that and the other thing. We had one hotel chain in the country that just wouldn't take our phone calls, wouldn't put us in. So, that cut out a lot of hotels when you're travelling away. But in the last couple of years, they've come back and they've a new manager. The new manager rang us up and said, look, you don't do any business with us. Why is that? Check your history, talk to the previous manager, but they're in it there, it's business, and they wanted our business, so we now do business with them. But there were people for a long time that we paid a check to before we got the service, but now we've developed more credit. People realise that the ethos of FORAS is transferred to the football club, and our ethos is transparency, it's honesty, and people realise they're eventually getting that message that what we say is what we mean, kind of thing. But you're right, in the good old days, back in the Celtic Tiger, everything was spend, and there was players' wages went into a spar. Like a player would play with, I don't know, shells, I think Lee's gone, and then couple of weeks later he moved to St. Pat's for an extra few quid, then he might come down south to us the following season, and each time the player moved he was getting more and more money, and there was even a case where some clubs had two contracts, the one that they showed to the FAI and the one that they signed with the player, and like that thing was found out thankfully. But so the club licensing system that you talked about is actually a godsend. We got a 65% rule is very important. But what's more important is that the FAI can put in place sanctions. Like for example, I listened to the talk this morning on licensing in the UK that might happen for lower league clubs, and they spoke about having to present quarterly accounts and things like that. We have to do it every month, and I think that's crucial. We also have to present end of year accounts. We have to produce a budget at the beginning of the season. The chairman, CEO and football manager have to go to a meeting with the FAI where they have to go through the budget line by line. If the FAI think the budget is, not attainable, they'll send it back to you and you have to readjust your figures and go back and meet them again. So there are good checks and balances, and I think it's helped us a lot. Like it stopped the wage spiral. In the good old days, there used to be a thing called Cork Mafia. When we went away to Sligo or Finn Harps or Dundalk or somewhere, there'd be a Cork guy stand on each turnstile to make sure that we got our share of gate events. And so other clubs thought we were being too cute or whatever, but we needed money to survive, I suppose, and it's like that in the League of Ireland. But thankfully, we've been in charge for 4 years. We have one paid CEO, we have a paid club administrator, and we have a paid football manager. And after that, the rest of us work 60, 70 hours a week, or as much as there's light, and that's it, we do it. And how long? 4 years we've done it, and I think we're doing okay, I think it's good.
Football's about dreaming, essentially. It's about fans wanting to see their team do as well as possible. How have you found that your fans have responded to an age of, not necessarily austerity, but financial realism, which is less sort of exciting and more gritty than spend?
I think this year particularly they've responded really very, very well, because up to a couple of weeks ago we had as many people through the turnstiles as we had in the whole of last season. We changed our manager, we've put in place a guy who's a legend in the club, he's scored more goals than anybody else. He was born in New York, raised in Roscommon, but he's Cork, and that works. So it's good at the minute. And I think they all respond to it, but I think what they would respond to more is if you want to do something like this. If you want to take in charge of a club and you want it to be, for the community, you must give them something to aim for. Like, for example, our aim is to get infrastructure. We don't own anything. The only assets we have, I suppose, are players who are under contract to us. But our aim is to get a ground and to have a home, that kind of thing. So if people know that you're doing something and you can give them a focus for the project, they'll put their hands in their pockets and they'll come on board.
I just wanted to touch on you before we open this out to the audience, because your questions are probably better than mine. We saw in England with QPR last season, the Football League obviously have their own FFP rules, not stringent as the Serie B's, but the Football League have tried to make an impact in that sense. And QPR basically decided that the risk of being fined wasn't worth the price they had to pay by not being promoted, so they just spent anyway. The example of Cork and the example of Serie B, obviously I doubt as many people in the room who disagree with them intensely and think, no, we should live in a sort of pure market economy. But they are reliant on everybody playing by the rules, and what we've seen in football more and more over the last 20 years, I guess, is that there are always people who don't want to play by the rules. So how do we match those two things, and how do we marry those so that there is a level playing field for people who want to do things the right way?
Absolutely. I think the only way of ensuring a level playing field is to have strong, consistent, coherent leadership from the people whose job it is. So the governing bodies, leagues, the national associations, and looking at it on a Europe-wide level, for UEFA's financial fair play rules to be as effective as they were intended to be, there needs to be complementary legislation on the national level as well. So what's happening in Serie B is great. The principles that Cork City live by are fantastic. Obviously, people often refer to the quality of the licensing system in the Bundesliga, for example. This is what we would like to see in place all over Europe, because clubs that operate sustainably in some countries are often put at a disadvantage by doing just that, by living within their means. There's an example from Spain, a club called Eibar, who 2 years ago were in the 3rd division. They won 2 promotions in a row, which in itself is a fantastic achievement. And they did that all the while staying in the black, which, if anyone knows anything about the financial state of Spanish football, is quite an achievement. But yet, yeah, it's a miracle, exactly. But according to the regulation of Spanish football, they have to, now that they're in La Liga, they have to have a share capital that's equal to 25% of the average expenses of all the teams in the 2nd division, not including the 2 clubs with the biggest outgoings and the 2 clubs with the smallest outgoings. So the upshot of that was that they had to raise 2.1 million euros in 6 weeks. Not because they didn't have any money, they were in the black, but because of the failings of the other clubs. So this place is, clubs that are run properly at a complete disadvantage, and the regulation has to be in place to stop this happening. It has to reward good behaviour, not punish it.
It's just that on the issue of the governing bodies, like in our case, for example, if you won the Premier Division in Ireland, you get €100,000. If you have a TV match at your ground and it takes from your crowd because people watch it on TV or go to the pub to watch it or whatever they do, but they certainly won't come through the gate, you don't get any compensation. Whereas several years ago you got $5,000, which wasn't a whole lot, but if you had 6 televised matches, that's 30k, that might pay a player for your season. But what the FAI, the governing body, tell us is that they put the TV money into the prize fund, which yet the prize fund has declined substantially over the last 10 years. So if your governing body aren't playing fair with you, they have to be open to criticism. In the same way that the board of Cork City, we're open to criticism from our fans. The FAI have to take criticism from us. And the Serie Lega has to take it from you, and the FA has to take it from people here. And I've heard lots of people criticise the FA today. And I think a lot of it is justified. They must come back and show, their bona fides with us, and they must reward us for what we're doing. Like, they've taken charge of the game, they take the kudos for it. They earned, 17, 18 million profit this year, and yet the prize fund is going down. They want the Strong League of Ireland. We had a manager who didn't know there was a league in Ireland, for example, employed by the FA. It can sometimes be ludicrous, but I think if the clubs get strong enough and give fair play to the FAI, they're part of the licensing system and they impose the sanctions, and that's good. But they must play fair with us. They must give us the wherewithal to keep doing what it is they say they want us to do.
Valerio, just in terms of Serie B, have you had much support from Serie A and from the FIGC?
It's alright, we get it.
The relation with Serie A is quite complex. One of the biggest revenues from Serie B is come from the Serie A TV rights, and so it's a big support, and we are working to can leave just count on our revenues, but is a long way to go.
They have to complement each other. I mean, the example, to go back to Germany, when UEFA introduced financial fair play, so from 2010 onwards, the DFL altered their licensing system in order to fit in with UEFA's. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it's not something that happens everywhere.
At that point, it might be sensible to see if there are any questions out there. There are. Do we have a microphone? You might just have to shout. The lady in the back there, I think.
I just wanted to say that I'm obviously completely in favour of financial fair play. The only criticism I have with the way it's working at the moment is how it's being disproportionately applied against smaller clubs.
Thank you. I'm sorry, for anyone who didn't hear, I'm just saying financial fair play is great, but it does get disproportionately applied against smaller clubs. For example, we heard right at the beginning of this talk that PSG and Man City have suffered the sanction of a reduced squad size for the Champions League this season. Red Star Belgrade have apparently breached financial fair play and they've been kicked out of Europe. So many Turkish clubs have been kicked out of Europe this season for various misdemeanours that the 9th place club in last season's Turkish league is in the Europa League. You will not see that happening in the Premier League or La Liga, even though the sums of money involved in the breaches of financial fair play are astronomical compared to whatever's going on in Serbia or in Turkey. So yeah, absolutely 100% in favour of financial fair play as long as it's applied equally to every team in every league in every country.
Yeah, I saw that Levski Sofia got done as well from their financial fair play. I think we can all agree that Levski Sofia are really bad guys in European football at the moment. I'm appalled by their meteoric rise to success. This has always been the criticism of FFP as it has come into fruition. It's not necessarily what UEFA thought it would be initially. That it does reinforce the status quo. Basically, it's setting up the big clubs to do what they want, and any club who tries to spend beyond this means to catch up is punished. And as you say, there's no question there seems to be a two-tier punishment for large clubs in larger nations and larger clubs in smaller nations. Is that a fair criticism?
I think, well, from our point of view, from supporters director's point of view, and I should maybe declare that we do receive funding from UEFA. I don't know if that's a conflict of interest in what I'm about to say, but to be honest, and I know I'm sitting on the fence here, it's probably too soon to tell. The financial fair play sanctions will be introduced on a sliding scale, so at the moment there's quite a lot of wiggle room for clubs that are losing money, for clubs that have significant debts. I think if our guest from UEFA was here and unfortunately he couldn't make it, he would say ask us in 5 years, judge us by our actions. And I think, to be fair, for now, UEFA have more than other governing bodies, definitely FIFA on the global level, UEFA are at least trying to do something to change the way football is run in their competitions. And I think they would say come back and judge us in 5 years and see if PSG and City have been thrown out.
The wage cap, of course, depends on how much money you have in the club to begin with anyway. So some clubs will have a bigger budget than others, so they're 65% is greater than the other clubs. And in the League of Ireland we found over the years that if the amount of money you can spend on salary puts you financially in second place in the league, more than likely you're going to end up second in the league on the playing field. Now, fortunately for us this season, because we have such a driven manager and guys who want to play for the club, give 110% on the field, we're in about 7th place in the financial table, but we're in second as of last night, first before that, in the league table. So you can overcome it, but maybe within those narrow parameters. I'm not sure how wide it will go.
Valerio, do you feel that UEFA's financial fair play will go far enough?
Yes. I think, to be honest with you, I'll make a comparison between the financial fair play of UEFA and the Serie B salary cap. I think that salary cap is more effective in the short term because it goes straight on the players' wages. That is the most important part of the cost of a club. But I understand the decision of UEFA to not work on salaries because I think it's very difficult to find a common agreement between over the leagues in Europe. So you have to think, you have to consider that UEFA legislation is about all the leagues. So I understand why they decide to work another aspect. I think it's good, and you have to find a balance between the commitment for the clubs and don't let big investors go away.
I think if we talk about, for example, TV money, people often make a comparison between football over here and American football. American sports in general are interesting because it's one of the most, they have a nature of these really capitalistic tendencies and the relentless pursuit of profit, but then they're highly regulated. So there's a socialist principle as well. But it's also fair to say that the owners of those American franchises only live with the restrictions that are placed on them because they're making money hand over fist anyway.
Which is because of being in sport, there's no relegation, there's not global.
Exactly,
yeah. Exactly. Further questions? The gentleman there.
I had an observation to make as a fan, and also a small question for Valerio, because as a Hull City supporter, we're about to take part in a competition that we may be in breach of financial fair play rules. And so as a supporter, it really matters, because we're potentially about to spend money on expensive trips and tickets to perhaps take part in a competition that we might not be able to take part in the future. So in a way it's like buying a cinema ticket with a guarantee of not being able to see the sequel. So that's I think the real concern of fans, is not least of which is it financially sustainable. The second question, Valerio, what we often hear said by uninformed commentators, particularly in our press, is that a salary cap can't work because it's in breach of EU legislation. How do you get around that, or how does your salary cap work with that?
We have the advantage, of course, that we work as a Serie B, we work as a second division, we work in a domestic market. So this rule is limited to Italian context, and was easier probably if the contest were European, we would have some issues. And another reason, because we were able to do that, is as I told before, is a soft salary cap. So if you let's say you pay the sanction, you pay a kind of luxury tax. You can overspend. Luxury tax, I mean, the club decide to overspend, and the league retain some money from the club. So in some way we we mitigate the rule to have the chance to implement the rule.
Just on the Hull issue, I'm not sure you'll know more than me. I think Hull probably will be in breach unless they get the wage bill way down, spend them way down. But my understanding is with UEFA, you probably won't be punished immediately for that. You may well get another chance. So by the time next time you're in Europe, as long as you've got your house in order. And Mr. Alan might not be there anyway. I'll be got a lesson for everybody. Yes, the lady.
I have the microphone. Sorry.
This microphone is Lord.
Two things about this. talking about financial fair play and establishing the rules. Once that I'm from Southern Europe and from Portugal, and we have a word that doesn't exist in any other dictionary called desenrascanço. This means managing to overcome anything that appears. So, one of the risks that comes for, I think it will happen in any country, is once we establish some kind of rules concerning financial fair play, clubs will manage ways to overcome it, to pass over it, if you know what I mean. This is one of the big risks. So probably when someone is regulating it, maybe you should be thinking 1 or 2 or 3 steps ahead, just to cut the path for the clubs to try to do something. And you have seen there are clubs that could be penalized due to amount of the players that they have, so they just pick up the players and send it to some other club in other country. This was one of the ways. It's the same thing in third-party ownership. We started saying you can't have third-party ownership. Okay, what the agent or the guy that has the economic rights for the player does, he lends him to a club from a country that doesn't cut third-party ownership, and that club loans him to the club that they wanted to. So I think this is one of the major challenge that we need to think how to overcome. And the second thing that I wanted to say is it's something related to what Valerio mentioned. It's the acceptance by the clubs to rules, because to some clubs it's easy to take one rule, to others it's not, whether it's okay. But I think in some cases this is hypocritical by them, because this is not nuclear physics, right? We don't need to make big calculations. We can pick up the revenues from all the clubs, establish some kind of media, some average, do some calculations, and establish good standards for what should be financial fair play. And they will say, oh no, that's wrong, that's bad. We can't do that, that's not possible. But that's what they do all the time. When they want to sell a player, they look to a player that was sold in the following country or an opposition club, and they say, oh, they sold their striker for 10 million euros. Our ones scored half the goals of theirs, so our cost is half of it. And we see our opponent's season tickets, and this is the one that goes to our pocket, right? We are used to pay 100 pounds, let's imagine. But they look to our opposition and they say, oh, but their tickets is 300 pounds, so ours should be 200. So for one thing, they say, oh, we can't compare us. For other ones, and the ones that go to our pockets, they are always willing to go. And this is the problem, and this is the hypocrisy from the leaders, from the clubs. And it's easy for me to speak about this because my club currently is the second in the division in the Premier League in Portugal, and it is the third one in economical value. It's easy for me to talk because I have more money than other clubs. But I'm willing to lower the economical risks due to financial fair play to ensure the sustainability of the clubs and to ensure the competition, because sport will only develop when there is competition.
I think it's hard to argue with that sentiment. Actually, defensive obligado. But the issue is that, as the gentleman quite rightly points out, you will always find clubs who will look for loopholes. That's the nature of football.
I totally agree, and it's me personally. I check, I monitor the application, the financial fair play. So I know very well the pressure of the clubs, because they like if I check really well what the other clubs did. But when it's about what a club does, is less happy if I only check well. So again, I think the Lega Serie B designed a very good rule, very smart, but we have to be careful and to improve and be very careful, because clubs, even they agree with the general idea, they always trying to find a way to to not respect totally the rule. So
I mean, Ugo is right. There has to be some collective responsibility from the clubs. There was quite an amusing quote from the now former president of Serie. He said, "Oh well, for all I care, Real Madrid and Barcelona can go and play in Portugal." I mean, okay, if that's what you want to think, but living in the world.
Portuguese appear to object to that.
Yeah, I don't blame them, but you know, clubs have to adapt to what's happening, and the reality is, in countries like Spain or Portugal, the big clubs will always, they've always been the big clubs, but they need to have opponents every week, and it's the same in every league. Pat can talk about in Ireland the effects of clubs going out of existence. It destabilises the whole league, and every supporter is affected by that.
Rory, if I can ask the chair a question on the panel, although of course it can be extended outwards. I'm going ultimately to ask you how you find supporters as you go around the country and speak to supporters. Do you not find the supporters' attitudes have changed? Because I certainly do. Now, I'm Stoke City, and I've supported them for 66 years, and I do see 40 matches a season, and I do live 5 minutes from Chelsea's training ground in Cork. So I know a fair bit of moving about. But what I really want to say is that it's true that a few years back, supporters said, "Oh, to hell with it, yes, we want to win the FA Cup, Portsmouth, we want to go in Europe, Leeds United," and of course we know what happened. And what was thought as answering the league was of course financial recklessness. We all know that now. I'm not blaming those specific clubs. You can't even blame the managers. I mean, you can't blame Harry Redknapp, because if others fall for it, he spends it. There's no rule against doing that. We all know that. And I think supporters now have got the sense to see that. Now, I can certainly see that with my club, because last year, we're not a club have gone into debt, which is why we've never done anything as a Stoke City. Why we don't have a very beautiful stadium. We had a very minimum stadium because we wouldn't buy what we couldn't afford. We've really done that very well, and as I say, it's why we've got no trophies in the cabinet. But 2 years ago, we did spend, the manager then, he did an Aldi or a Lidl. He piled high, and sold low. Well, it doesn't work in football like it works in supermarkets. Supermarkets bring in the customers, and what happens in football is you get into debt. So that doesn't work. And so we decided, when we left just over a season ago, we decided we couldn't go on like this. There were other reasons as well. We wanted more attractive football, we wanted a youth policy and this, that and the other. So we decided we certainly weren't going to continue along that route. We now have a manager who hasn't had enough credit in Mark Hughes, and he came to the club that badly needed to have a change of method of playing. He wanted to deal with the academy, which was, the previous manager had no interest in it, that sort of thing. And really, he needed a hell of a lot of money. And he didn't generally know it. He actually spent less than £6 million last year. This is a club who'd just taken in 35 million from Sky alone. But he didn't spend it. So this year, we're paying off the debt. So we've gone down from £32 debt to 5 now. And so far this season, Mark Hughes has brought in 5 players, and he hasn't spent 5 million. Now, we'll probably have one expensive player or two, which we're entitled to because we just picked up 65 million for Stroud. And I'm trying to say, you are going to say, well, what do you supporters think? And I think the lazy Jones will just parrot the old mantra, well, it's what supporters want. It isn't what supporters want. I do hope most people in this room back me, because all the supporters I speak to as I go around the country, they say, to hell with that, we want a well-run club, we don't want this recklessness, we don't want to win, and then find out we go down 3 divisions. And I think you will find football supporters now a lot more responsible. With regard to how fair play is working, last year people, including myself, were very pessimistic and we thought, and cynical, because we thought it won't work. But I was relatively pleased because I looked at a club like Chelsea, and as I say, please don't think because I live near Chelsea I have any truck with them. I am 100% Stoke City. But I just noticed what Chelsea did. And when Mourinho came in, he said, we won't do anything this year because the team isn't good enough. And looking at a forward line, which was no better than our forward line, I thought, no mate, you won't. Now, okay, he did brilliantly until halfway through the season, but in the end, he told them he knew that. Now, if financial fair play was not in being, then they would have overspent. So I think, unless you can tell me otherwise, that they kept to it. And I think they are. But I do agree with the lady behind who said it has got to hold for everyone. You just can't have high penalties for one club because they're considered to be a nothing, you know, this arrogance there is, that there's only the Premier League and there's only this, that and the other. You've really got to have fairness right across the board, and this is for all countries, so I think we're all interested in how it goes. But so my final question is, do you find now that supporters are more sensible now, they realise what's going on, and we are all knowing that it is much better to have a team who are an average team than the one who's brilliant one year and they disappeared 3 years later?
I think that's, I don't want to speak for all supporters, but in my experience, I think there's probably, the cautionary tales of Portsmouth and Leeds, and there's been others across Europe, have probably taken hold to some extent. People are now aware they don't want their clubs going out and spending recklessly. I think if you look at the sort of list of who's signed who this summer, it's quite interesting. There's a lot in England, there's a lot of free transfers. In Spain and Italy, there's always a lot of free transfers, just most of the clubs have run out of money. In England, there's a lot of free transfers apart from at the top 6 or 7 clubs, where the fees they're paying are extraordinary. And I said to someone the other day that if I was involved in European football, and every time the Premier League announces its latest TV deal, I'd rub my hands in glee, because you think, right, well, these idiots are going to come, and they're going to waste loads of money on our players. So instead of paying £4 million for a £4 million player, West Brom are being charged £9 million for a Nigerian striker who can't get into the Nigerian team. That's just one example, again, nothing against West Brom. And so I think that there is an acceptance amongst some fans that things have to change. But I think at the top end particularly, there is still an impetus, an impulse to go and spend money as the solution to the problem. I think that probably still needs to change. But I agree with you broadly that it is not quite as craven as it used to be. I don't know, Ben might be able to help me out on that a little bit as well.
I think the lady was correct. That good practice does breed good practice, and clubs, although you can blame the actions of individuals, generally they're just a product of their environment. I mean, we work with supporters and supporter-owned clubs in Sweden. Now, over the last sort of 10-15 years, their UEFA ranking has gone one way, down. But the attendances, almost without exception at every club, have gone up, or at least stayed consistent. The reason? It's because the competition is broadly equal. They have big clubs and small clubs, of course, but they have to live within a licensing system. They have to live within their means, which creates competition. It means people don't know the result before they go to a match. And that's what football is about. I mean, people want to see, they want to be entertained, they want to feel like they're part of something. And the other side of it, as well as the regulation, is that supporters in Sweden have a seat at the table. You know, they're at the heart of the club, they have dialogue over the issues that are relevant to them, whether that's the 50+1 rule, or whether that's safe standing, or whatever. And financial regulation is good, it's important, but supporter involvement is the other key building block in creating a better football.
Man with the microphone, if you've got chooses to leave it.
Sorry. Picking picking up on this point that fair play must at least be fair, does the team think that UEFA ought to do something about the fact it's not a level playing field when it comes to European competition? And I'm thinking in particular of the distribution of television rights, where at the one extreme you've got Spanish and Dutch clubs who negotiate their own, so the top clubs in those countries are very much richer than the lower clubs in their Premier Leagues, through our system where 50% of it is distributed equally and 50% is in two forms, performance related. Maybe even there are some leagues where it is actually distributed equally. I'm absolutely shocked to find myself saying I have some sympathy with the Premier League clubs when they complain that it's not a level playing field when they're up against Real Madrid or Barcelona.
I might sort of direct that to Valerio, because I know that as well as the salary cap, one of the things that Serie B has done is the way that TV money, I think, is distributed. Part of that is awarded to teams who have developed the most young players. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which I think seems to be a very sensible idea.
Yeah. You are right. We distribute part of our revenues depending of how much clubs is younger players, and I think is one of the more important mission of Serie B, because the Serie B needs to improve to be a place where clubs compete, but where young players can be developed and maybe in the future become player for the national team.
In fact, it seems fair, I think, that the part of the TV revenue is divided according to performance, whether that's league performance or the performance of your youth academy. I think it's okay to have an incentive-based system, but presumably from a club's point of view, it's crucial that the majority of it is awarded fairly across the board to increase competition.
Sure, in our case, it's not awarded at all. It goes into a bottomless pit in the FAI somewhere. And they say it goes into the money you get when you win the league or the FAI Cup. But those awards for winning those competitions have been reduced over the years, so I don't know where it goes.
Which is
that's
the distribution. We might take one more. I think we are running out of time.
Hi, full disclosure, I'm a QPR fan, so we are the poster child for poor financial fair play. I also love the idea that Chelsea should be given a pat on the back for spending £1 billion worth of Siberian pensions and then sneaking onto the bar at the last minute. But all joking aside, it goes back to actually something that you said before, Rory, which is how our club quite, rightly or wrongly made the calculation that it was worth not necessarily. I don't think we spent our way out of the Championship. We didn't save money. And Fulham are going to find exactly the same thing this season. Anybody, I would say, coming down from the Premier League, especially if they've been there for a while, is going to find that difficult. I'd just like to know how can we manage that between competitions? Because frankly, I'm fully behind financial fair play, but any team coming down from the Premier League is going to immediately breach the Football League rules and then get punished for it in a way that it seems slightly unfair, because we would have to effectively bankrupt ourselves to get underneath the bar.
Yeah, no, that's an absolutely fair point.
Yeah, I would completely agree, and it's a problem that exists in many other countries as well, where the top division will have one set of rules, the second division will have another set of rules, and they don't match up. And I think Valerio can talk about the need for harmonisation, is the word that the European Union uses. The rules have to match up.
How is it doable with the difference in incomes?
It's our case. Serie A has his own rules. Serie B has its own rules, and the third division as well. It's difficult.
So what happens when a club is relegated to Serie B?
about financial fair play, about salary cap. Salary cap is not applied to contract the club players contract the club signed in the past, because it's not possible because if the club comes from Serie A. And in addition to the salary cap rule, there are other controls. Some are the same as Serie A adopted, some others are different. So when the club is relegated, has to be compliant with the rules of the league, of the new league.
Yeah, I mean that seems like a sensible thing, doesn't it, to say there's better harmonisation between the competitions and an acceptance from the Football League in QPR's case that you can't, or Fulham's case, you can't expect a club just to shift all of its players straight away. They have to honour those contracts. It would help with QPR if they had some relegation clauses to reduce the wages.
Or some contracts, yeah.
Well, I suspect that might have to be it, unfortunately, but thank you so much for all your questions. Sorry if we couldn't get to yours. I hope that was mildly interesting. A round of applause for all the football.